Good morning, Senior Counsel Martin Daly. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Rennie. I am well, thank you. And yourself?
I am doing pretty good, and always the better to have you here with me, sir.
Well, very kind, thank you.
As far back as 2003, one could look and see that you have been writing about this situation, juries, and the legal system in general. You've been there all the time. You're a former president of the Law Association. You are one of the eminent attorneys in Trinidad and Tobago. Chief Justice Ivor Henry's address was marked by him saying the jury system is not working and had to go. He said it is proven time and time again to be a total disaster and with many systemic failures. So he is proposing juryless trials. Among the many things he said, I want to sort of zero in on that this morning, good sir. What is your opinion of the Chief Justice statement that we must, and he from the urgency in his voice, immediately deal with juryless trials? What is your take on that, sir?
Well, I don't know how getting rid of the jury is going to solve the problem of cases taking 10 years to reach the courthouse where the jury sits. So from my perspective, and as you know, I've articulated that in my column today, from my perspective, there are a lot of other nuts and bolts that have to be dealt with before we take such a fundamental step. I am open to the possibility, as has been done abroad after proper study, of perhaps not having the jury in certain types of cases. Mm-hmm. But I would not like to see a root and branch removal of the jury. If, for example, there's a problem with intimidating jurors, then we have to deal with the factors that cause the intimidation, not get rid of the jury. Because logically, of course, the same forces that intimidate juries, judges, single judges, or judges sitting with assessors, will not be free of such intimidation, and they can be reached. I don't mean reached corruptly. People know where their grandchildren go to school. Judges are so young now, they have children going to school, but people know where they can be reached. So it's completely cockeyed to talk about getting rid of things because you can't control the intimidation factor in a society, or because trials take so long that jurors get emotional or economic cost is too high to sit as a juror. You have to deal with those things. And this is what we do. When we can't manage something, we get rid of it, and it causes more trouble. So this needs a lot more thought. And I repeat the question. How is getting rid of the jury going to solve the problem of a case taking 10 years to reach the courthouse where the jury sits? But, of course, like you this morning, I am happy to be a chicken on the ground. It gives me an idea of what's going on. I don't like to fly up so high, you see. And then you can't see nothing when you're flying so high. Sorry to be so colloquial.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. One of the areas that he advanced is one of the reasons he advanced, the Chief Justice of Trinidad and Tobago, for this position is that 41% of the times, I believe he said, that in the case of trials, we've had to revisit it because of problems with the jury.
But we must solve those problems, because if one of them is intimidation, one of them is the length of trial, the same problems will beset whatever you replace the jury with. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you something else the chickens on the ground are worried about. By and large, we have a good judiciary, but there are some people sitting there. I wouldn't like my relatives to be tried by them sitting alone, because after a long time in the courts, you get to know what their outlook is. And, there are some people there that it would be worrying. Let's put it like that. I'd rather have my fate in the hands of 9 or 12, the case may be 9 persons, more broad-based. 9 chickens. Leave me with the chickens. I good there.
Concurring with you is the former Prime Minister himself and Attorney Basil Panda. He said yesterday not enough was being put forward as to the problems with the jury-based system that would have led to the conclusion that it ought to be done away with. Senior Counsel Pamela Elder said she would rather burn her robes than to deal with a jury-less criminal system. We also had Senior Counsel Israel Khan, who came out strongly against it for some reasons that I found a bit perplexing, but I could get there later on. So you're not alone in that area, sir.
Well, I don't plan to burn my robes. I can't afford to, because I didn't get a Las Alturas brief. But, those kinds of reactions are not helpful, because what it does is it then makes people feel that because you don't want to agree, that somehow you're defending a status quo. So sometimes a little moderate analysis is more helpful.
One of the things I learned early is that you don't try to fight two revolutions at the same time. But I was a bit confused by two things. Let me deal with one first. Senior Counsel Israel Khan saying, and this really surprised me because I couldn't see it in the debate, and I don't know if you want to try to educate a chicken like me. He said the first thing an individual in this country will want to know when he is being tried is what kind of judge you have. What do you think he means by that? I am continuing the quote. He wants to know the racial origin of the judge.
You see, I mean, as you will have gathered from what I said earlier, what kind of judge you have is a relevant question. But it has not, we mustn't rush to this race thing right away.
Yes.
Judges are complex human beings like all the rest of us. And the worldview of some of them might be different from your worldview or mine. And it may lead them into perceptions of accused and may lead them to be impatient with people who are not soaring as high as they are. So I could support him to the extent of what kind of judge you have.
But the racial component
I don't want a judge telling me, for example, that my witness is ugly. And I heard a report recently of such an incident. I don't want some judge who is impatient or who is taking out, their problems on the accused and so on. So that is a legitimate question. What kind of judge you have? The race thing, of course, is completely different.
That is the part that I became a bit disturbed about because I can see the merits or demerits, the argument for or against the kind of judge you have. I do have a problem when you inject race in this because that just confuses me. But let's go on. There are many other parts of this, and
absolutely.
one of the
I'm
other
not
parts.
saying race may not be a part of it. We don't always understand each other's cultures. But, I mean, that's not the first thing that we have to look at. We have to look at the more formidable problem of why will a single judge or a judge sitting with assessors be any more physically safe than a jury? And why can we assume that those people are going to be paragons of wisdom and don't carry certain... I prefer to say their worldview than their prejudices. Some of the things they think positively about may also impact. But I'm very concerned about those things, and so I don't think we can just rush at it like this. And I mean, look at it this way. There have been 5 or 6 amendments, probably more, to the Evidence Act over the last 10 or so years, maybe more. We have taken other shortcuts with the traditional rules, and we're still in the same place. So this idea that you tinker with this, you tinker with that, abolish this, abolish that, is going to make this... the silver bullet difference. I don't buy into that at all. In fact, I was very impressed with the guest you had on earlier this morning.
Yes. Because
there, too, he was telling you about the nuts and bolts that had to be done. You can't simply look at homeless people and say, I suppose I don't know if I'm allowed to say, I can't think of the right adjective, these vagrants, And he was very carefully pointing out that these are people whose lives have gone wrong for a lot of different reasons. And the thing that really struck me is he said, well, the policemen and the other people who have to deal with these people need to be trained. And why that struck me is we have some judges who need to be trained too. So, I don't buy these silver bullet ideas and saying I'm hamstrung by this or hamstrung by that. I completely accept that there's legislation that the judiciary needs that will help progress in the courts, such as the abolition of preliminary inquiries, but they have to pull their weight too.
Make clear for our listeners, because that's one of the areas, incidentally, listeners, that voice you're hearing as the other side is the learned voice of senior counsel, former senator, former president of the Law Association. He is Martin Daly. He's also a columnist. He has a column in today's newspapers that you'll find very worthwhile reading. A speedy sentence against evil work. That a part of that column I want to get with in a minute, but I do want to stay in the area of the Chief Justice. He savaged those who, like me, propose night courts. He said the fact that night courts were a failed experiment that keep being proposed by those who have no idea how the system works. He said
when people in high office start saying, you have no idea of this, you have no idea of that. There are many things we chickens can say that the judges have no idea of either. So, that is when the debate gets done at a level that is unhelpful. Every single person in public office, I shouldn't say every single person, most people in public office, with a few exceptions, take the line that commentators are armchair critics. They ride donkey carts. But in every civilized society I know, progress is made by the interaction of people who live in and work in the world of ideas with people who have to administrate things. And if you have a Mental Health Act in England, it is, however, 400 pages, I think your guest said, it is because a lot of commentators and a lot of people in the field who may be academics, whatever, would have had an input into that. So this dismissal of critics is a kind of visceral reaction that I really have a problem with. For one thing, I wonder if the people who are in receipt of constructive criticism have any idea that the constructive critics themselves come under pressures, get attempts are made to ostracize them, to bend them to the will of the establishment. They behave as though a critic is immune from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and it's simply not so. It's one function in a society. I'd like to do a lot more, but I don't believe in filing cabinet integrity, so I wouldn't dream of doing anything that requires me to declare my assets and liabilities. And then what's the position if the liabilities exceed the assets? You don't get a walkout. I mean, it's all, I really have a problem with this attitude towards critics.
I'm going to stay tongue-in-cheek on that one. I don't think the concern for most people these days, factor and all, I don't think the concern is whether the liabilities outstrip the income, as if the income outstrip the lavish lifestyles.
Well, that's another thing, you see. I mean, a lot of critics are people who are doing other things and have to, handle their stories. They don't have tax-free salaries. They don't have super great housing provided at the state's expense. And I think when you get those kinds of benefits in a small society like this, you have to be a little more tolerant of how the public feels. I don't buy into this idea that if the public expresses discomfort with something, the answer must always be, oh, you don't understand, you're not educated enough. The public opinion has to be respected, whether you're a Chief Justice, whether you're a Prime Minister, whatever you are, public opinion has to be respected.
Martin Daly is my guest this morning. We are talking. I was struck that the Attorney General, Faris Al-Rawi, said that the present administration has already drafted legislation to do away with jury trials and preliminary inquiries. I know preliminary inquiries. I know that you are one of those who say, let's get rid of that because it takes too much time and we spend too much money on it. Okay, fine. But are you surprised, as I was just surprised, that he said the government has already drafted legislation to do away with jury trials?
No, because when we spoke the last time, I told you I left the Senate in 2002, and during the period I was there, ending in 2002, there was legislation before the Parliament to deal with the abolition of jury trials. One of the things the Chief Justice didn't tell us, and we discussed this the last time, who are the cadre of judicial officers that are going to deal with the sufficiency hearings that the new legislation will require? We just don't have that piece of the puzzle, and it's a very important piece of the puzzle. And it would have been a lot better, if he could have told us who those chickens were going to be.
You played that chicken well.
The point about it is people say these things about powers, they say these things about chickens, and when the public reacts because they feel they've been disrespected and they then lower the estimation in which they hold the official, why are they surprised?
I know that you were in concert with me that the Chief Justice, or whatever his version is, he has the interest of Trinidad and Tobago foremost in his mind to get this done. He also articulated a lot of problems faced by the judiciary. I think you will concur with him on that.
Yes, I don't think that he's a lightweight at all, and I'm happy that he has strong opinions. But there's been a little a little intolerance has crept into some of the statements, and that's a bit worrying, That's a bit worrying, because for every finger that is pointed at an ordinary citizen, we can point a finger at the judiciary or any other high office institution in the land, and people must be careful in their language, Take me, as I confessed to you before, it took me a little while to understand that sometimes you have to say the same thing more moderately to get people to listen. And most of all, the Trinidad public always feels disrespected very easy. I think the word disrespect is used more often almost than any other word. People are very sensitive here to being told off, And you won't persuade people and you won't get buy-in if you're always telling them off.
Martin Daly is my guest this morning. That's just a quick look at what the Chief Justice is saying, two specific areas. And I do want to come to your column because there is a link there. Your column today speaks in terms of removing the partnership between crime. Those who commit crime, the underworld, as it were, and that is part of the problem we have here. You cite, for instance, the Chief Justice of Barbados, who, when speaking to his nation after the latest problem they had with a daylight shooting, said that there are dangers of politicians lying in bed with the underworld. Put the dots together for me, please, sir.
Well, he actually said it before the shootings because he knows what's coming. The dots to be connected there are, unless you tackle the big fish, or I'm going to use another word, the facilitators, then all of these problems, including threatening of juries and the buying of juries, will continue. And interesting enough, I read a lot of the regional newspapers almost every morning. And there's an editorial in the Jamaica Gleaner today. I pay particular attention to Jamaica because I interview me sometimes over there. And today's Gleaner, you must look at it. They have an editorial where they're giving advice to the Jamaican Constabulary Force, as it's called there. And one is they have two paragraphs on the need to remove the facilitators and to go after the facilitators and not the men, not the chickens on the ground who are carrying out the orders of the facilitators. And that is a problem right through the Caribbean. There's an intersection between holding high office and monkey business. And until you get rid of the facilitators, we won't be going anywhere. And I don't know if the editorial writing the Gleaner will be dismissed as a chicken, but they made complete sense. You have to get at the heart of the problem, not nibble around the edges and get small boys. That's not going to solve the problem.
All back to 2003. How was it you described it? You said they are grassroots bandits or the devils in disguise in our Westwood parks.
Well, they have them. They have them, and a lot of them in disguise, yes. I remember, I'm around so long, I have a story for almost everything. I remember attending opening of Parliament on one occasion when I was in the Senate. And I moved my seat twice because I did not want the guest of a high official. He was sitting too close to me, and I didn't want to be photographed with him, so I moved my seat twice, not once, twice. It's not now that it's going on. The country knows it. You see, the country knows it.
One of the superintendents for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service recently said, "We keep being blamed for everything. We cannot be held singularly for all the ills in the country as it relates to crime." And that sort of adjusts us with what you have in your article. It must be clearly understood that law enforcement failure is not a failure of the police alone. It includes the Coast Guard, the Customs, and the Inland Revenue. Speak to that, please.
Well, because those are agencies, in addition to the police, whose duties will take them into the front line against the machinations of the underworld. Customs being an obvious example. Things come in containers and that kind of thing. So there has to be an all-around effort. I mean, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the police while their detection rate is so low. But yes, there are other agencies involved. And I mean, I think there's a case to be made. I think Customs is probably under the Ministry of Finance. I speak subject to correction. And there may be a case to be made for putting Customs or part of it under national security and giving it the same attention as a protected service gets, you know. It have to be thought out and not just jumping out of the box and saying that. But these agencies, and I don't know what kind of protection they have, I don't know if there are terms and conditions of employment, and I don't just mean the money and the benefits. I mean the whole way in which they go to work, where their offices are. I don't know how secure they may feel if they have to interact with the criminal element. And all those things, just as your other guest was pointing out about mental health, are nuts and bolts things that we have to think about and not just be, throwing words at each other.
The Board of Inland Revenue, the Revenue Authority, which is something we all was hoping for. You mentioned that, but I want to link that with what the Chief Justice of Barbados was talking about when he said Trinidad and Tobago, in Trinidad and Jamaica, there was evidence that showed political parties embracing gang leaders and drug lords, including politicians involving these criminals with that of state-funded projects.
Well, I'm not suggesting that Sir David Simmons knows everything, but I have a lot of respect for him. And the fact is that he sat and directed successfully. He didn't make too many clerical errors as far as we could see. He directed 2 commissions of inquiry, one into the attempted coup here, where he would have learned certain things. I remember they had some sessions in camera. And then he was in charge of the inquiry into Jamaica, into what happened in Tivoli Gardens when they were trying to extract Dudas. So he's seen and heard a lot of things, and has that is a peculiar experience, which makes me hearken to what he says on this subject. We might disagree about other things. And the evidence is there. You have to deal with the facilitators, and you have to take the heart out of this criminal body. You can't just cut off a toe here and a finger there. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
It is 11 o'clock here on 107.7. My name is Rennie Bishop. It's good to have you. This is Brunch. We've got standing by Mrs. Brenda Gopi Singh, who is the Vice President of the Hindu Women's Association of Trinidad and Tobago. We will be talking to her on the issue of child marriages, but we are, again, fortunate to have Senior Counsel Martin Daly with us. We are looking at primarily what was said by the Chief Justice, some of the challenges we face here, and his column this morning that includes the Board of Inland Revenue. And that Revenue Authority, I think it's very important to the citizenry, Mr. Daly, to feel a sense that white-collar criminals are in fact being looked at, because that is the only way you can get to folks who cleverly know how to get the right accountants to dot the I's and cross the T's and do things under the radar. But we are still waiting for something to be done with that. What is it a case of? The recruitment, the training, or the will?
I think it's, I'm not pointing fingers at any particular department of government. As you know, my overarching view about all of this, having been a commentator and been scratching the ground for nearly 15 years, is that we have a problem of will. We have a problem of will. If you saw it with your guest earlier talking about mental health. Can't get anybody to listen, to pay attention, to try and do things differently. So it's not about, pointing a finger at any one particular government department. It's first and foremost, it's a question of will. And second, it has to do with the smallness of the place, and therefore we have to have governance rules, not things we import from abroad, where a man in Minnesota wouldn't know the man in Florida. Whereas here, everybody is connected in some way, and we have to think out all of those things and provide a governance system that works for us. And we have to give people the protection they deserve if we are asking them to, so to speak, bear our arms against the arms of the criminals. We have to think out all of those things. I don't think we're doing so. I mean, and everything your guest said this morning really, really worried me, that all these different agencies and groups of people who should be coordinating an effort towards understanding the vagrancy problem are not really working together. There's no overarching policy or philosophy about how we're going to deal with these things.
In conclusion, Senior Counsel, I just want to go into one light that I found. There were a number of them that I found, but then again, I am too a chicken. A couple of them I found good areas of clarity, but I was encouraged to find out that the discussion is there for a family court subdivision and a unified children court subdivision. The project is seeking to bring to life the children court subdivision by creating a children court system. I think this is only a step in a positive direction. Absolutely, and what will have to go with that is where necessary. I've been reading up some stuff recently about how much parenting has changed, given some of the things to which children have access now. So presumably,
as an adjunct to that, they could look at giving people some parenting advice, all of these things have to be thought out. You can't just say, flog them or lock them up or take away the cell phone. That's certainly not going to work. Of course, there must be levels of punishment and sanction, which is a sort of a better word. But all of these things have to be thought out,
Well, I thank you so much. I should ask you to look in that crystal ball just before you leave, though. Factor, you think it will be passed, and will it be passed? I mean, you cannot change this. I mean, I'm not understanding this argument. If this is the template you had a Model 1 and Model 2 to choose from, as put out by the greatest power in the world, the United States. They say choose one. You chose one. This is the one you're going with. What amendments are you going to put to that? I mean, what do you see happening with Factor?
Well, the fact is... if the metropolitan countries want this and you don't do it, they big, you small, sanctions will be applied. And be better very careful with this.
Yes, otherwise
whether we like it or not, because if it affects the correspondent banking relationships of banks in the region with banks abroad, you're going to damage industry and trade.
And as Sparrow would say,
there's a very good piece in Express today by the Dean of the Faculty in St. Augustine, explaining the difference between FACTO, which is a one-way flow of information, and another acronym which I can't remember, which is a two-way flow of information. It sheds a lot of light on the subject. But at the end of the day, we have no choice, If they decide that they're not going to, that because we won't share this information, we're going to be sanctioned, well, we'll feel a lot of pain.
You see, you step on a very important area as I depart from you, sir. That whole question of the two-way flow of information.
That's
I get
correct.
the feeling that is one of the areas that is causing the greatest disquiet among folks.
Yeah,
if the information is flowing, yes,
but
if it's flowing both ways,
with terrorism, and so they want to know who has what where.
Well, yeah, because the flowing of information, just to be very clear, FACTOR specifically deals with the American government, the Treasury, the Board of Inland Revenue. They are saying, listen, the IRS that is, they are saying, guys, we want to know where our nationals are, what they hold by you, and what they're making and so on. We want total declaration. We want access to their accounts. However, so that's one thing. But I think the fear that I am getting is folks worried about when the reciprocity factor step in and we make requests of our people having stuff over there. Some people are... am I scratching the ground here?
But you see, this idea that we have a choice in some of these matters is misplaced. There are some things where the metropolitan countries say, do it this way or perish, or do it this way and be damaged. And you have to face the fact there's no choice. It's sad, but that's the way of the world. I guess at the end of the day, that eagle will eat the chicken.
If you don't believe it, go have a discussion with Bailey's, who tried to step away from it. They found out early, you better come into compliance.
But I look forward to hearing Ms. Gopi sing, so thank you very much.
And I thank you too. I thank you too, sir. You have yourself a wonderful day, and thank you again for taking the time. Bye-bye now. Senior Counsel Martin Daly, our guest inside Brunch. Standing by is Mrs. Brenda Gopi Singh. We are going to talk about child marriage for the simple reason that the way we look at this is things will come up and they will hit the headlines. And a lot of politicians depend on what is called the 9-day memory of the Trinidadian for it to go away. I don't think this should be allowed to go away. As such, we are going to come and look into the situation and the position of the Hindu Women Association of Trinidad and Tobago after this.